Hi, I'm Araminta Matthews, your Senior Instructional Designer. This is part 2 of Kennebec Valley Community College's new requirement that all instructors, whether they're teaching in person, online, or hybrid classes, use Brightspace to grade their students, minimally on a weekly basis. I have broken this very lengthy video into chapters because people grade based on an individual experience and an individualized method. So if you are collecting submissions to grade in person or you are observing things in person, you would grade differently than someone who might have their students submit work through Brightspace directly. So we'll begin where we left off after the gradebook setup wizard in the previous video. If you have not already watched that video, please stop now and watch video 2 in our series of KVCC new requirements for our retention software. If you have already watched that video, then this screen should be familiar to you. So, as I mentioned, this section is about creating a weighted gradebook. A weighted gradebook is when you break your grades into categories, and then whatever you are grading fits within that category. For example, participation might be worth 30% of the overall score. And then it doesn't matter if you have 5 assignments for participation or 55 assignments for participation. Whatever you put into that 30% bucket or Brightspace category, Brightspace will factor as no more than 30% of the total score. So in order to do that, we have to first set up the categories into which we'll put our assignments. So after you've completed the setup wizard, this is the screen that you'll see. If you are already have already done the setup wizard, you can go through the setup wizard again to get to this screen, or you can go through manage grades. But the first thing you'll want to do is create each grade category and set its value for Brightspace. So I will click create a new grade category, and I need to give it a name. So we talked about participation being worth 30%. So I give it the name participation. The weight is 30%. I want to distribute weight evenly across all items. I do recommend that you just keep it simple. So give it a name, give it the weight, click this button here, leave everything as it's defaulted, and then save and close. And your first category is created. Now your category has to sum to 100%. I've already done a gradebook, so as you can see, I have a problem here. My grade book is set to sum to 130%. Now the last chapter of this video will teach you how to troubleshoot problems like this. For now, let's pretend that we are completing the entirety of our gradebook, so I need to set up the remainder of my categories. So to do that, I go to New, Category, and I need to finish the number of categories that I have for the class. So participation was worth 30%. I know the final is going to be worth 25%. And I may have 2 or 3 assignments for the final, or I may just have 1. It doesn't really matter. So go ahead and set that setting up. So that brings me up to 55% of my total. I also would like a category for practice work. And I'm going to make that worth 25% as well. I'm actually, rather than save and close, I'm going to hit save and new this time. So far I'm up to 80%. So I have 20% left to work with because I can't go higher than 100%. And I've done practice assignments, the final, class participation, which for me will include class discussion and activity in class. So I might have tests and quizzes for the remainder. And because I've already used up 80%, all I have left is 20. So I put that in, distribute evenly, and now I can save and close. Now, if I've done this correctly, I shouldn't see any notes here at the top. But like I said, I'm going to teach you how to troubleshoot this. So if you see a note at the top that your final calculated grade is summing to something other than 100%, that means that your gradebook is not set up correctly. And I will show you how to fix that in the final chapter. But let's talk about individual assignments. So you've set up the categories, but the categories still require you to have assignments inside those categories. You have to have something to grade. So basically what you've done is you've made the bucket. Now we need to put the stuff in the bucket that would count toward the value of that particular category. So if you are an in-person grader, or you're grading things that you are observing in person or collecting in person, like somebody literally hands you a sheet of paper and you're grading that, then you can go directly here, click New, Item. So this would be a graded item. Numeric is your default. You do have some other options there, but numeric is the simplest. And I want a participation credit. So I'm going to say class discussion. And you know what? I'm actually going to grade that every week, because we're going to have at least one weekly discussion and I want to see how well people are doing. So we'll call this one week 1. I could even do it month 1, whatever is comfortable for me. I had mentioned as well that you may want to come up with a coding system. So I'm actually going to show you right now what I meant by that. I'm going to put W1 dash class discussion, and you'll see why in the gradebook in a minute. It will make it a little easier for me to find this, because now I've set up a code to help me find this in the gradebook. Now, because I've set up the item, you'll see that right now it's defaulted to no category, but I need this to be part of the participation bucket that I created. So I'm going to click the drop down and I'm going to look for that participation score that I created. That's 30% of the total value. And I'm going to go ahead and add that item here. I can set the maximum value of points for this, and I can set any number of points I like. I could grade on a 3-point scale and say that students either have unsatisfactory, satisfactory, or exemplary, and that's what the 3 points are worth. I could go with a classic 100-point scale. Whatever points I put in there, it doesn't matter, because the category is going to factor everything to a value of 30% of the final. So I can put any number in there as long as I grade within that number. So if I put 3 points and I grade my students and I gave a student 99%, well, I would either get an error message or I've just given that student bad at math, a 3,000% bonus or extra credit score. So whatever point value you put for the graded item, just make sure that you grade to that number of points. You want to keep things simple, have everything be worth 100 points. So I'm going to go ahead and click Save and New, because I know I need to make another discussion, because I said I'm going to do this weekly. So week 2, class discussion. And again, I need to put that in the correct category. I also want this one to be worth 100 points. Save and New. And I also know that there's going to be a participation fair. So it's going to happen at midterm, where I have them do like a fair where they have to bring projects together. So I'm going to call that the midterm fair. I'm going to put that in the participation, and I'm going to make that worth 100 points. Now, we'll say that's it for my participation, but I'm still clicking Save and New because I need to add some items to the other categories that I created. So final paper category would be the final that is worth 25% of the grade. Make that 100 points because I want to keep life simple. Save and New. And in addition to the paper, I also want an annotated bibliography. So I'll say, you could really put anything in there at all. It could be final paper and final clinical, final paper and final demonstration, final paper and final project, really anything you want. So Save and New. Now I've got my final set up. And what else did I have? I had tests and quizzes. So again, these are all manual items. So this is me grading things that are handed to me manually, not things that are going through Brightspace. So we'll call this one W4 practice quiz. And it is a quiz, so I'm going to want it to be in the test and quizzes portion. 100, Save and New. And I'll do one more practice quiz. We'll make that week 8. Practice quiz. And if it can get confusing if you give everything the same kind of name, like assignment 1, assignment 2, assignment 3, because you might forget what those are. So don't be afraid to give titles to the graded items that will help you remember what it was when you go back and look at it later. Maybe practice quiz isn't enough. Maybe it needs to be week 8 water elements quiz, right? So that I remember when I look back at it what that was about. I do need to remember to put it in the proper category and set the point value. And then of course I have one more section, which is practice assignments. So I'm going to have week 3, we'll do a practice paragraph assignment, and that's practice work. Again, keeping it simple, 100 points. And I also want them to practice revision. So I'm going to go ahead and do and what I have just done is created the work that lives inside the category. So as I'm looking at the Manage Grades section of my gradebook, I can just scroll down. The category itself is slightly grayed out, and it is to the far left. And then the items within that category are indented slightly with a white background. So let's scroll down to the categories that I just created. Participation, as you can see, is a category over here. It's worth 30 points. And because there are 3 items in it, and each of those 3 items is worth 33.333% of that final score, I can go back and add as many items to this participation as I want. It will never change this final value. The only thing it will change is the weight value of each individual item. So if I add a 4th item, then these will each be worth 25% of that 30%. The final, like I said, you can have as many items in a category as you want. It doesn't change the overall percentage to the final grade. So this is how you create a manual gradebook. So we've set up weights and we've added manual weighted items. Stay tuned for more information about how to create different types of things to grade in your gradebook. In the previous section, we looked at how to set up a weighted gradebook in which your gradebook is sectioned into categories, each category being a percentage of the final 100% score of the overall course. Now let's look at how to set up a point-based gradebook. Now, a point-based gradebook is when you grade every item based on a set of points. So I'm going to go ahead into the setup wizard and actually create a points-based gradebook. So I'm selecting points now instead of weighted. Remember how I said you can go into the setup wizard at any point and change these things? If you watched the original video, for gradebooks, which is the second video in this series, you know all of the things I'm clicking here and what they represent. And I'm going to go ahead and leave them all at their defaults, because I just want to create that foundation of a points-based gradebook. So now that I've got a points-based gradebook set up, I'm going to create my first graded item. Now remember, when you create a graded item, it's a manually graded item. So it is something that you are grading that you observed in person or that you received in person. It is not something you are grading that came through Brightspace itself. So if you want your students to submit their papers through Brightspace, or to submit videos through Brightspace, or do discussions online through Brightspace, you will be grading in a different way, and I will cover that in a different chapter of this video. Again, this is how you create graded items that you will score manually. So I'm going to go ahead and click Create a New Grade Item, and numeric, because of course this is points-based. And you'll notice that unlike the weighted section, the weight value is gone. Categories are still here because I did set categories up in the course, but you also may notice that this is not here. So let's just start by saying we know that we're going to do every week we're going to do a clinical observation. So I'm going to set up a little shorthand, clinical ob, and it's going to be CPR. Again, no category. And I'm going to want that to be worth 15 points. And every week I'm going to do a clinical observation. So let's do another one. So we'll do W2 dash clin ob. This time it'll be X-ray. And maybe the students are looking at X-rays for the first time. 15, save and new. And I'm going to do one more, and it will be W3, clin ob, patient interaction. And still, they're all worth 15 points. I might decide that the patient interaction needs to be worth more. That's fine too. But for the sake of argument here, I'm going to say that that's worth 15 points. So now I want to make something worth a little more weight. They're going to do a midterm test. So I'll say midterm exam. And if the clinical observations are all worth 15 points and I do one every week, that means I'm around 100 or about 225 points for just the clinical observations by the end of the semester, because the semester is about 15 weeks. So I might want my midterm to be relative to that. So I might say the midterm is worth 350 points. I'm going to save and new, and I'm going to just jump ahead and imagine that we're at the final now. And the final will be a project, final project, not a paper. And I know that I want the final to be worth more than even the midterm, so I'm going to make that worth 500 points. And I'm going to click Save and Close. Now, because I am working in a slightly different gradebook, previously I had weights, and there was a note across the top telling me that there was an error. Because I've changed it to points, there's still an error here if I grade these items that are in categories, because those items are still factored to the category that it's in. So if you're doing a points-based gradebook, only do a points-based gradebook. If you're doing a weighted gradebook, only do a weighted gradebook. Don't mix the two. It will only mess up your final grade. So let's just scroll down. Let's pretend like that other content isn't here, and we're just going to jump down to the stuff that is points-based. We've got a couple of clinical observations here that are worth 15 points apiece. We've got the midterm and the final project, and the final calculated grade is going to be worth a total of 3,457 points. Now that's based on everything that's currently in the course. If it was just this content here, of course, that would be less, but that's a points-based gradebook. You simply give a point value for each item you're grading that is relative to the importance of that item in your class. And that's how you set up a points-based gradebook. Stay tuned for the next section. Now in this section, I'm going to show you how to set up Brightspace to handle the submissions of homework for you. Now it is possible for you to have a mix of manually graded items, meaning things that you observe in person or grade in person, and a mix of things that you grade online. So the example that I'm about to show you is a weighted gradebook, but the same rules apply if you're going with a points-based gradebook. So the first thing you want to do is know that there are 3 types of things that you can grade in Brightspace, 3 basic types of things you can grade in Brightspace. And all of them I want you to set up through the content button. And if you watched the first video on uploading the syllabus, you will know why. So go ahead and watch that if you have not watched it already. So the first thing you will need to do is set up a content area. If you do not set up a content area, you run the risk of your students not knowing that there's actually content in your course, or not being able to find the assignments that you're making. So what you're going to create is a section of your course. Now, most people set their courses up week to week. So this, I might put week 1. And that's my content area, week 1. Some people might set their courses up differently. Like if you're teaching in person, you may not have assignments every week that you need to grade through Brightspace. You may just say in-person assignments and online assignments. If you are teaching online, you may have content mixed in with your assignments. You may have videos you want them to watch or papers that you want them to read before they actually do anything with the work. But the point is, you do need to go to a content area. You do need to create an item in the content, which you do by adding a module. You need to give that module some kind of name. So the simplest thing is to week 1, week 2, week 3, week 4, week 5. You can add to that if you want. You could actually put the date in, week 1, January 15th to January 20th, whatever you like. Once you're in that module, you do have the option to add a description. You do have the option of adding dates and restrictions, which will be useful to you in the last video of this requirement series. So just remember that this is available. But for now, let's talk about those 3 items that you can create in Brightspace that are graded. So now that I'm in a content area, I am just going to give it a description because that helps the students kind of understand what's up. And typically what I put in the description area is what's due. So for this one, I'm going to say practice paper due Monday, practice or class discussion, post due Tuesday, and responses due Thursday, and practice exam due Friday. And you'll notice that I gave 2 dates for the discussion. That's because I need my students to have time to be able to post their original thoughts and respond to other students in the class. So that's why there's 2 dates for that one. I'm going to go ahead and update this. And general rule for instructional design is whatever you put in the description or even in your syllabus, you want to place it in the same sequence in your course site. So let's start with a practice paper. Now, when I say paper, I really mean assignment. So I'm going to go to Upload, Create, New Assignment. And it's really important that you understand that your students can submit a variety of things to you through this feature. It doesn't just have to be a paper. They can submit recorded audio, recorded video. They can submit links. They can upload files. They can, if they have a Google account, they can attach a file from Google Drive. They can insert images. Anything you can do here, they can do. They can insert video, images, any number of things in their response to you. But I want this to be a very basic paper, so I'm going to call this Practice Paper Demo. And I do need to make it graded, so I'm going to say that this paper is worth, let's make it 120 points so it's easy to distinguish from the other examples. And then I need to click the drop down because I need this to be in the gradebook. Now, if I am using weighted categories, I'm going to edit or add an existing link. And then I'm going to choose the graded category. So create link to a new grade item, choose the grade category. And I want this to be, this is practice work. So I'm going to go ahead and click OK. So now this paper is going to appear in that bucket that I created for practice work, which I believe was worth 25% of the overall score. So if I give it a due date, something wonderful about the due date is it will put that due date in the student's calendar, and they'll get a notification that there's something coming up due. So they'll get little reminders that they need to do something for you. It also gives you, when you're grading, a notification if they've submitted that paper late. So if you have a late work policy, you'll be able to see whether or not they submitted it after the date and time. In this instructions box, provide the details about what you want them to do. Please submit your paper here no more than 500 words. Be sure to accompany it with an audio file that explains how you came up with the thesis and researched the paper. And I'm adding that little trick just as a little hint for you all. There's a lot of murmuring about fear of AI generated content. And one of the ways that you can work around your students giving you AI generated content is to actually give them a reason or give them cause to show you how much effort they put into the construction of their paper. So by asking them to add an audio file, which they can very easily do by clicking this record audio button when they submit their paper, you're literally asking them to explain how they came up with their paper. And if they used AI, that should become very apparent to you pretty quickly. So that's something that I do. But of course, you are free to just leave it at paper if you like. Now over here on the right, you have a few options, start date, end date. Leave those blank. You could put a start date in there. What that does is it locks the student out of being able to do anything until that start date comes around. But if you put an end date in there, it blocks the student from being able to see their assignment or your feedback after that date is passed. So I recommend you ignore this. There are some other elements here, release conditions and special access. If you need to make use of those, make an appointment with an instructional designer and we'll show you how and when the best use cases are for those types of things. Submission and completion is where you make the selection about what type of thing you are accepting. So in this case, we want them to upload a document. You could also say text submission, which is would then create a text box that the student has to write into. So for instance, if you wanted them to write like a thought journal where they could submit a weekly reflection journal, you could do a text submission and the student enters the text into a text box just like this one. Paper submission, again, is something that you'd receive on paper. Observed in person, this is interesting. Observed in person gives a button that's like a student toggles on or off as after they've completed it. So I don't recommend you do that one. Unless there are specific circumstances. So again, reach out if you have questions. I'm going to go with file submission because again, this is paper. I'm going to allow them unlimited attempts. I could say I only want them to have one attempt, but I'm going to give them unlimited because I'm going to allow them the opportunity to revise this paper if they don't like their score. I do have the ability to restrict file types. I can say I only want PDFs. I can make a custom file type list and say I'll only accept DOC, DOCX, and PDF. I'm going to leave it as no restrictions, but I do want to warn you that the grading interface in Brightspace will only show you a PDF or a Microsoft Word document in the grading interface. You can still download any other file type and look at it, but when we get to how to grade with the gradebook, it'll make a difference. So you may want to put in your instructions, submit only PDF or DOCX files, please. Okay. All submissions are kept. You can select really any of these that you're comfortable with. I do recommend all submissions are kept. For those of you that are worried about forgetting to grade, you can say, put your email in here. And every time a paper is submitted, you would receive an email saying you have a submission to grade. So you could just put your email in there if you want. You actually don't have to do that because when you come to Brightspace, you'll get a notification that an assignment has been submitted. And then the last thing I just want to point you to is evaluation and feedback. You can create rubrics. And rubrics can be a real time saver, but that is an advanced grading technique. So we will discuss that in brief in advanced section of this video, but feel free to reach out for an appointment if you have questions about that. Now, one thing I want to make sure you really see here, right now this assignment is hidden from student view. Well, it's got a due date really soon. So I need to make sure that's visible or the students will not see it and they will not be able to complete it. So make sure you toggle that to visible. I'm going to go ahead and click Save and Close. And you'll see that it populated that content area I created. As soon as I get back there, I'm going to use my breadcrumbs to get back there. So these are breadcrumbs here. It populated it in the content area. So now my students can go to week 1 under content, because remember what I said in the first video, and they can submit their paper here. And notice how that, remember how in the first video I said these 3 buttons are always at the top and they vary depending on what the student has done? Notice there's a number now under course schedule. That's telling the student they have something they have to do in the next 7 days. So by putting a due date in here, I added it to their calendar, and that's a very helpful thing to do, particularly online. But let's get back to the different things that you can grade online. The next item, of course, is a discussion. So again, as before, upload, create, new discussion. There are 2 parts to a discussion, the forum and the thread. You really only need to make 1 forum, because a forum is just kind of like the categories for grading. It's a bucket, and the threads are the different topics within that bucket that you're grading. So really all you need to do is create a single forum, and you can call it class discussions. If you really feel the need to break forums up and have different types of forums, you are welcome to do that. You really only need 1 though. So right now I know that I need to do a discussion. We're in week 1, so we're going to call this discussion icebreaker. And I like to code mine, so DB1 for discussion board 1, and then dash icebreaker. And I do that because it's going to make it easier for me to find this later. It is graded. So this is going to be worth, we'll say 25 points, and I need to put it in the gradebook. So again, edit or link to existing. I am grading by category, so I'm going to choose a gradebook category. This is a discussion, so for me, it's under the participation credit. I'm going to click OK, and now it is in the gradebook. So here, I'm going to add some instructions. And for discussions, a lot of people don't really know how to work with an online discussion, so I like to be really explicit. So I would offer the first prompt, which is, I'm just going to be really simple. Initial prompt, explain the color blue. And I said that was due by Tuesday. Due by Tuesday. And then response prompts. This is when you respond to classmates. Reply to at least 3 classmates. You can put any number you want there. By Thursday, where you describe the number 8. I'm getting a little philosophical here. But in a discussion board prompt, it's really important that you give explicit instructions, and you are only able to put 1 due date in for a discussion. So I always put the earliest of due dates, and I can't do that until I get back to the week 1. I'll show you that in just a moment, because I only have the start and end date here. Remember, we don't want to do that because that makes it invisible to our student. So I'm going to go ahead and set up the default post and completion. There are a couple of things here that are sometimes handy. There is one item that I like to point out. Learners must start their own thread before they can view or reply to other threads. That can be really, really handy if you're worried that your students are going to cheat off each other. Like if you're concerned that a student is going to go and read everybody else's answers before they post their response. If you select this, they literally cannot see what the other students posted until they post something. If you allow learners to be anonymous, that can be dangerous, so I don't recommend you do that. Anonymity sometimes breeds contempt. So I do recommend you either leave it at default participation, or the learners must create their own thread before they can see what other people post. And then posts must be approved before they display. That means you are choosing to mediate everything students post, and that might be important. Maybe you have a bully in your class, but otherwise you can go ahead and leave that unchecked. Again, just as I said before in the assignment, you can add a rubric here. You can also add evaluation of individual posts, or allow learners to rate posts. So this is something I really like to do in what I call an FAQ board. I have my students ask course questions in a discussion area, and I allow them to do a 5-star rating. There's also up and down voting. The reason why I let them do a 5-star rating in an FAQ is a student may ask a question and somebody may give an answer, and if all the students rate that answer 5 stars, it moves up the thread, and so everybody else in the class is aware, oh, that's a great answer. There's a rating on that. You may not want to do that on a generally graded discussion board, though, because, what if somebody gets 5 stars all the time and somebody else only ever gets 1? That could create some confidence issues. But it could be really great on ungraded or non-graded discussion boards, where the whole point is to get people to share exciting information, like share an awesome website that you found on this subject this week, and then everybody upvotes the ones they like the best. Again, I have to make this visible or my students will not be able to see or complete it. Save and close. It will bring me to the back end of the graded area. And here I can add a due date. I can also add it elsewhere. Remember, I want them to do it by Tuesday. And I'm going to go ahead and just set the default time as 11:59. That's their initial post. Remember, I can only put one due date in here. I don't want to put an end date because that makes it invisible to them after that date is passed. I don't want to put a start date. Yes, they do have 2 due dates because they have the date by which they need to reply. I always put the first of the 2 due dates because I want the students to know what they have to complete first and not be late on that. Otherwise, they'll miss out on the opportunity to do the discussion. But I always keep a mental check when I'm grading that they did reply by the 2nd due date. So once I click save, I've got that due date in there. I can use my breadcrumbs. These are breadcrumbs to go back to week 1, and I will see now I've got a practice paper, a discussion with a due date, and I'm ready to set up my exam. So just as I did before, we've got our assignment, we've got our discussion. Now I'm going to make an exam. Now, all things, whether it's a test, exam, or a minor quiz, is a quiz in Brightspace terminology. So I'm going to call this W1, and this is going to be a diagnostic quiz. And what that means is I'm checking to see what they already know about the subject. Notice how it's a default of 0 points. That's because every question I add to this quiz, I will be setting the points specifically. And so whatever number of points each questions end up being worth, that's the value of the quiz in the end. Edit or link to existing. Yes, I still want to do that. I need to put it in the test and quizzes section category that I made. Click OK. I'm going to let that sit for a minute. I'm going to do a due date of the 26th because I did say Friday. Please complete the reading before attempting this quiz, whatever other instructions I may have. And now I'm ready to create the questions. Now, add existing means I'm working with a test bank. So if you are lucky enough to have a test bank or a publisher that has provided quiz questions, you can use add existing. For the most part, you'll create new. If you would like Brightspace to machine grade your quiz, then you can use multiple choice, true or false, fill in the blank, yes, it's true, multi-select, matching, ordering, and even short answer, and have Brightspace machine grade it. So let's just very briefly choose a couple of these. So I'll start with multiple choice, and I'm going to ask which is a color, and I'm going to say yellow, 9, B, highway. And of course, the right answer is yellow. So I select the right answer, and I'm going to randomize the answer order. And what that does is it mixes this up. So every student who takes the quiz will see these in a different sequence. I can add answers. So if 4 is not enough for me, if I want 30 options for this multiple choice quiz, I can certainly do that. I need to set a point value for this question. I want it to be worth 5 points. Save. Moving on to my next question. So I'm still doing machine graded. How about I do a short answer? So machine graded can be short answer. I might write, please fill in the missing word from the following quote in Hamlet. Oh, what a of work is man. And the correct answer is peace. Now, I may want to qualify multiple options here. What if my students aren't very good at spelling? I could write, put a comma in, hit the space bar or hit comma, enter. There we go. Sorry, it's comma, enter. And then I might put an alternate spelling because I'm going to give them the benefit of the doubt. Maybe they just can't put the letters in the right order. And I'm going to do one more spelling. I'm going to put the E before the I because perhaps they get the letter sequence off. It is not case sensitive. So as long as they type in one of these words, then it will machine grade as correct for the student. And I'm going to make that one worth 10 points. Okay, create new. Let's do a true or false question. So it does not automatically have to be true or false. It can be. So in true or false, I'm going to say true or false. This is a lie. False. 5 points, save. If I were to add a non-machine grading question like written response, it would still machine grade the ones that are machine gradable, but I'd have to come in and manually check the written response one and make sure that the student got it right. So Brightspace would hold off on publishing a grade until I came and checked it. So I'm going to go ahead and just stick with the ones that I know are gradable. And matching can be a complicated one, ordering can be a complicated one, but they are possible. So if you want to talk about those, do schedule an appointment or look at our documentation. Again, availability and dates. You can put a password on your quiz if you're concerned about who takes it and when. Timing and display, you can put a time limit on the quiz. I caution you against that as it can be an accessibility issue, particularly for people with test anxiety. You can shuffle the question sections. That can be very helpful because that can make sure that if students are actually taking it live or sitting next to each other, they're not seeing the same question at the same time. You can later, you can, in an advanced setting, you can set up Respondus Lockdown Browser, which is a way of preventing them from using the internet to find the answers to their questions. You can allow multiple attempts. So right now it's set to just 1 attempt. I can, however, allow them to do 4 attempts, and I'll keep the highest of whichever one they do. So I'm going to go ahead and click OK. Give them 4 attempts on this quiz. And then I want to auto-publish the attempt results because this is a machine-graded quiz. Again, if it's a manually graded quiz, that's fine too. I am allowed to do that. I'll just have to come in and manually grade it. But this is machine-graded. I do want it to synchronize to the gradebook. And I do want to show the attempt grade to the learner when they have made the attempt. So if they fail it, they know that they can try again for those 4 attempts that I offered. And remember how this was 0 before? Now it is equal to the number of points that I set up over here. So this is working out beautifully. Now again, I need to make sure it's visible, save and close. And I have now created the 3 different types of things that are easily graded in Brightspace itself. So let's take a look at the gradebook and just see where those things appear. So if I go over to the gradebook now, I will find under the categories that I created for participation, I've got the manual items that I created. And I also have that discussion icebreaker, which is actually an item in Brightspace. And I will show you how to grade that in the next section. But let's just take another peek at. There's the final content. We've got practice work, the manual items that I created, so those in-person items, but also the Brightspace item. And then we've got the tests and quizzes. We have the manual quiz that I'm going to do in class, and then we've got the quiz that I'm actually administering through Brightspace itself. And all of that is in my gradebook, and in the next section, I will show you how to grade. In this chapter, we'll learn how to grade Brightspace gradebook items so that we stay on top of the weekly requirement to ensure that our students are aware of how they're doing in the course, and so that we remain aware of how our students are doing in the course thanks to Brightspace's organizing tools. So in this course, which of course is a fake course, none of these students are real, and none of the assignments are real, so you are not seeing restricted information. There are a few places where you can see some practice grades. Well, let's get to the section of the course that I created. Now, as you will recall, in the participation section, I created some manual graded items. Now to grade, I navigate to the gradebook, and I get there again by clicking off from the home page. I click Grades and Grades, or I can click Course Admin and then select Grades from the assessment section. Once there, I navigate to what I'd like to grade. If there is something new for me to grade, I will see it appear with a little orange dot next to it. If it is a manual column, I won't see anything. Now, by manual column, you may recall that in both the weighted and points-based sections we discussed, you can set up graded items that are not on Brightspace, meaning things that you observe in person or grade in person. So the week 1 class discussion, that actually was a live discussion. So I'm going to grade that as though I had, right after class, I'm going to sit down and grade everybody's discussions in that session. So I head over to the gradebook, I click the drop-down arrow, and I go to Enter Grades. And I don't, these actually are real people who will get notifications if I put grades in there, so I'm not going to grade them, but I will grade the students who will not receive an update. So KVCC test user, they did pretty bad. They're getting a 65 for that first one. That Araminta person, though, she was awesome. She's getting a 99. Oh, and we have a WCCC test user. They did all right, too, so they'll get a 95. I'm going to go ahead and click Save and Close. Actually, I'm going to give a 0 to 1, just so you can see what that looks like, because remember, you do have to hit a 0. If I don't, I want you to see what happens. So those 2 students that I didn't grade, they're not getting a final calculated score. If they were to look at the gradebook, they would not know how they're doing in the course. If they did not complete the work, it is my responsibility as an instructor to give them that manual 0, because remember, we set the course up that you have to enter the 0 if they are late or if they don't complete the work, even if it is a Brightspace graded element. So that is how you grade a manual column. And that is any manual column. It could be a clinical observation. So let's just do one more. Enter grades. I observed everybody this week and everybody did awesome. Remember, it's got to be out of that 15 points. So I'm going to just go right down the list and say 14, 11, 12, and 9. And save and close. Yes, I want to continue. And then notice how the scores are getting updated with each thing that I grade. And now let's grade some of the Brightspace interactions. So you've seen what it's like to grade something that you have witnessed in person or that you read in person, like a piece of paper that was handed to you. Let's see what it's like to grade the assignment, the discussion, and the quiz that we received, that we actually put through Brightspace. So in the participation section, I did have an icebreaker discussion. And there's one student who participated. So these other students, it's past the due date. They've missed it. They're going to fail. I can click right on this to jump to that section, but I'm actually going to go to enter grades because I like to grade them all in sequence. And I'm going to go here and I'm going to hit a 0 automatically for everybody who didn't do the work and click save. And it's going to ask me, do I really want to do that? Yes, I do. They didn't do the work. And then I'm going to click on this to see the work of the student who did. Now, this is a discussion board. And this student posted a discussion where they added written response. They actually added a video response. They even added a photo. Yes, that is me, Halloween circa 19 something or other. And you also, when grading discussions, see all of the replies the student gave to other students kind of out of context. So when you're grading a discussion, you can tell at a glance if they met all of your requirements because you see everything that that student posted in one place. What you don't see, though, is the context of their response. If you want to see that, you actually need to go to the discussion. So you would go back to content, you'd go to week 1, you'd open up the discussion and you'd read all of the discussions in order that way. But you can still grade from here because you have a sense of whether or not they met your requirements. Now, this student did not respond to 3 students, which remember was a requirement. So I'm going to go ahead and dock them a few points. I'm going to give them some feedback and say, remember, you needed to post a response to 3 student peers. Nice photo. Doesn't date you at all. And when I click publish, that score is going to publish to the gradebook. Now, if more than one student had completed this discussion, I would see user number out of number. So I could use these arrow keys to toggle to the next student in the list and continue until I've graded everyone who has completed that item. Now, when I'm done, I just need to make sure I clicked publish. If I'm not sure, I can click update, and then I'm certain that that grade has been recorded. I'm going to X out of here. It's going to bring me back to this page. Notice the grade isn't recorded, so all I need to do is click refresh. And yes, I do want to resend because I need that grade to update. And there is the score, and there's the feedback. Now, if I want, I can give feedback to these folks that didn't do the work. So I'm just going to go ahead, click the pencil, and say no work submitted. And save that feedback for them. When I'm done, I'll click save and close. And as you can see, again, that score is constantly being updated with the most recent information, which is very, very helpful both to you and the student as they are getting a sense of how well they're doing in the class. So now let's look at a sample paper that is submitted or an assignment. So I'm going to, again, go to enter grades and go to the full list. I'm going to give 0s to the students that did not complete the work on time. Actually, we'll say that this person submitted it to me by email and it was late, so they're going to get docked a couple of letter grades. So they earned something. I'm going to save that. Yes, I'm ready to save. And maybe I'll add some feedback for that student. But let's look at the paper. So the grading of a paper is really convenient in Brightspace. And this is one of the reasons why you might want to have any written work or even photographed or videoed work submitted through Brightspace because you're about to see how it renders in the grading experience. So the first thing I want to draw your attention to is that there is a comment feature, and so a student can write you a little note. For instance, let's say they're having some difficulty with citations. They might say something like, "Hey, I'm really struggling with citations. I feel like a chicken. Can you help me out?" And yes, they can add mixed media here. They can add videos, they can add recordings, they can add images like you see here. But the actual document is this document right here. So that was a comment. So basically this student sent me a little note. And if I want to read the paper, I actually have to open it. And this is actually from my presentation at Dirigo this past summer. So just pretend that this is a paper, or we'll say that the paper assignment was to create a bingo sheet. So now I can see the paper here on the left, and over here on the right, I've got my grading material. But what's handy about this is I actually can annotate this. So I can select the pen tool, size and color pen, and circle things, underline things, cross things out, put a box around things. I can add comment boxes. So go ahead and add a comment box here. This is fantastic. And I can even change comment box color and say this needs work if I want to color code things. Just remember that color coding doesn't always work. Not everyone has full color sight. And I can add text. And I have control over the size and organization of that text. So it's defaulted to Helvetica 18. 18 or 19 is a good default size for text that you're going to enter onto the page. Just be careful where you put it. You are missing a word here. So I've just shown you how to annotate a paper. So in addition to the annotations here, I can download the paper if I want to read it offline. So that's what that button is. I can zoom in if I can't quite see, or rather, I'm sorry, this is zoom. I can search the document if I want to look for a particular word. So I'll look for the word use, and it will let me jump to all the different places that that word was used. So if I need to search for a specific word, let's say they were required to write about a specific topic, I can search that document for a word related to that topic. I can expand it so it takes up the whole page, but over here on the right, I can provide more detailed feedback. Please see my annotations. You did great. Please visit. And then here I can offer resources if I want. Here's a link to the citation style guide at OWL. Here's a funny photo. And if I expand this, I can insert anything I want. So I could insert a photograph, for instance. So the student gets an image as well in case that's helpful to them. And then I do need to give them a score. And of course, the score needs to be out of 120 points. So what Brightspace will do is factor that against 100%. So if I give 111 points out of 120, we'll see once I get back to that page what percent that turns out to be. And again, if I have more than one paper, I can use these toggle buttons to toggle through them. When I'm done, it's updated, the annotations are saved, and the student can see those annotations. Come back here, refresh, yes. Updates the score. The student now has an A- on this paper. Save and close. And scores get updated once again. So as you can see, these scores keep changing in real time every time I update a score. Now let's look at the test. Now remember, when I set up the test, I did set it up to machine grade. This student has 2 attempts. Unfortunately, the short answer is not grading correctly, and I need to determine whether or not the student's answer works. So as you can see, I answered peace, but the student, I actually needed to answer peace with a comma. That's why it's grading me wrong. So this is a user error. I, as the instructor, put 2 commas here I should not have. So this came up as incorrect for the student because I didn't put a comma after it. So you see, it is pretty sensitive. You have to be pretty precise. But I see that the student did get the correct answer, so I'm going to go ahead and override that. That is a 10. I see that they got the right answer here. They got a wrong answer here because it shows me. I'm going to go ahead and update that. I'm going to see that it does change the score from what it was, a 5 to a 15. I'm going to go ahead and update that. And then close this out, refresh, and that should change the diagnostic quiz score to match what I manually overrode. Now, again, the due date has passed, so I've got some students that I need to hit a 0 for, so I'm going to go ahead and pop in and give 0s for the students that did not complete the quiz on time. Save and close. Yes, and once again, we have an updated assessment of how the students are doing in the class at the present moment. In the penultimate section of this gradebook video, I want to show you briefly how to troubleshoot a very common problem that occurs in a gradebook. Now, remember at the beginning of the video, I mentioned that if you see a note up here that says that the calculated grade sums to anything higher than 100%, that your gradebook is not calculating correctly. Well, that does need to be addressed, and that can be complicated depending on how you have set up your Brightspace course or your gradebook. For instance, if elements of your gradebook are deployed in the course site itself, you actually have to hunt down the actual item that's being graded. It's not that difficult to do, but it does require a few extra steps. You have to delete that item from the content area from being an active item in the course, and then you can delete it from your actual gradebook. Until you do that, you won't be able to make that adjustment. Now, if you're grading with a weighted gradebook, it's a very simple solution. So what you will do is in your gradebook, you'll go to Manage Grades. And in this case, the problem is we actually have too many categories and too many individual items that are scored at a point value that are not in a category. So what I can do is select this option here, and I'm going to bulk edit. And by bulk editing, I can see everything all at once. And sometimes I might have to scroll left and right to see the entire field here, but it looks like I can see everything. Now, this is the category that the item is in. And this particular course site, because it's a weighted course site, if I see anything that is in a none category, it means that it is adding points over the value of the score that I need this to be adding. So the easiest thing to do is either delete them, and I'll show you how to delete one of these in just a moment. We'll delete the midterm exam. Or I need to add them to an actual category. So the categories that I created for this class were participation, final, practice work, tests, and quizzes. But I'm actually going to go ahead and move these to the previous ones. So I just need to make sure that they are where they belong. So I would want to be checking what it is and make sure I actually put it in the right spot, that I don't put it in the wrong spot. And I did want to show you how to delete one, so I am going to leave that. That one is none for you. So right now, all of those are there. And I cannot delete items here. So the first thing I wanted to show you is the easiest thing to do is to make sure everything is in a category. Now that should address some of the points. Now I was originally summing to 290% out of 100. Let's see what that did. I brought it down to 210. So I still have 110 points that I need to account for. So let's look at what I can delete. Now again, I'm going to select all, and I'm going to click More Actions, Delete. Do not worry, it's not going to delete anything. It's going to bring me to a page that tells me what I can and can't delete. Now, if something is grayed out, I am unable to delete it. If it is not grayed out, I can delete it. So in this case, I am able to delete the midterm exam, which I told you I would. And I'm actually going to delete the categories that I created today because those categories were added to a pre-existing course that already had categories in it. And that's why I'm having a problem. So once I do this, though, all of these elements, you'll see what happens. So yep, I do want to delete them. And now I'm still summing to 200. Now, why could that be, you think? So let's check that out. Again, bulk edit. Now, I deleted some categories, but what that did was it left some assignments that weren't in a category. Now, I could have deleted those assignments too, but I know I need them. So what I need to do is just go through and make sure that they are added to the appropriate section. So the midterm fair would be, and the icebreaker is a discussion, the final paper. We'll just call that weighted category. And I just need to keep going down the list and make sure that I put everything where it belongs. Because if it is not in a category, it is going to throw off my gradebook. So I'm going to go ahead and hit save, and let's see how that does. Oh, the error message is gone. There's no message at all, which means my gradebook is now summing correctly to 100%. So why don't we pop over to the Grade Center, enter grades, and see if that changed anybody's scores. So if you'll recall, we had a couple folks failing, and we had one student at a C. And in fact, it did. That C student moved up to a B+. So I'm sharing this with you because I want to stress the importance of ensuring that you have an accurate structure of your gradebook. If you do receive a warning notification that says your gradebook is summing to anything higher than 100%, you must adjust it or you will not see an accurate reflection of the student's grade. Now, having said that, this is still not accurate because look at all these assignments that have not been scored. This is an assignment attempt that has not been scored. And if I keep going through, I bet there are some others. Here's some discussions that haven't been scored that need to be. So I am not current as the instructor here. Here's an assignment, and zeros have not been distributed to the folks that need those zeros. And this student, it looks like, submitted a revision after I graded them because that little orange dot means there's something there I haven't seen. So I still have more work to do as an instructor to make sure that this is up to date. As for our last chapter in the gradebook feature of this Brightspace training, so that you can meet your KVCC requirements for our new retention software and the academic affairs policy, I wanted to talk to you about a few little nifty tricks that can save you time and energy when you set out to grade. Now, these are advanced features of Brightspace, but they're relatively easy to learn how to do. And if you are interested in them, I recommend you reach out and schedule a time to work with someone in the office, and we'll be happy to show you how to create these. Or you can check out our documentation page to see how they work. So in the previous section, I mentioned that there was a category that had been ungraded. This category has a rubric in it. Now, in Brightspace, you can create a rubric, and a rubric is a fancy word for a checklist or a pre-populated document that has a bunch of feedback that's already written into it. And that feedback has different scores based on different levels. And there are different types of rubrics you can create. And when you create a rubric in Brightspace, it allows you to very quickly grade and give feedback, and it also allows you to show the students how you're grading them before you even set out to grade them. So let's look at this example discussion. Here's their discussion posts. And here is the outcome rubric for their grades. So as you can see, there are, this has been set up ahead of time. So this is a rubric that has been set up. Now, when you're making an assessment, like I showed you in an earlier section, when you're actually making the assignment in the content area, you can create a rubric right then and there, or you can create your rubrics ahead of time. But what a rubric does is it gives you a way to just point and click very quickly through the overall score that a student earns. And I'm going to go ahead and clear the override because it's not coming out the way I want. And then this should be 10 of 12, so it's 10 of 12. And there's also learning outcomes that I can create that give me a quick glance as to whether or not the students have picked up on some essential outcomes that I want them to learn. And I can say that, yes, they've gotten it, or no, they haven't yet. And when I go into my, it's called Mastery View in the gradebook, I can see those things. So between rubric and learning outcome, this allows me to do some pretty advanced grading elements. And just look how quick it is to grade these things. I can look very quickly here and just check out what the scores are and pop in what I think those scores should be. And these don't have to say just one word. They can say a whole lot of feedback already written into them. And I can add individual feedback here as well. So I can fine tune each criteria item with feedback. Hey, you should have done a punctuation in this one, or hey, you should have cited your source. And what Brightspace will do is it will factor the point value for the rubric as the score. And I can give overall feedback and do all the same things I do with any other grade. Work with those outcomes again, and publish. And remember what I talked about, when you have more than one student, you can toggle through. So I have now graded those students. I'm going to go ahead and X out, refresh this so that I can see the ones that got grades, see how they did, and then pop a 0 in for the students that did not complete the work. Save and close. And again, that overall grade should adjust with each update I make to anything that is added to that final graded column. So if something has a rubric, it's just a fast way for you to grade and provide feedback to your students. And just one last thing I wanted to show you, which is that mastery view. So if you also set up learning outcomes, you can attach learning outcomes to individual rubrics or assignments, and you can test, like at a glance, determine whether or not your students got it or haven't gotten it yet for whatever that outcome is. Like, well, Araminta has not yet figured out how to do underwater basket weaving level 1, but KVCC test user certainly has. And this bar here tells me the percentage of students who have or have not yet achieved this goal. So I can also set up these learning outcomes that give me this mastery view and kind of at a glance determine whether or not my students are meeting some specific goals that I have set for them. So between rubrics and the mastery view, with learning outcomes, those are two features that can speed up your grading and your feedback process that are advanced elements of grading that we would be happy to discuss with you at a later date. Thank you so much for taking the time to learn how to set up your gradebook. Do remember that you are required to grade within 1 week of the submission of an assignment so that your students can be aware of how they're doing in the class at any given point. And one last thing, remember how I said you can use the setup wizard at any point? Well, now that we are at the end of the semester, let's say I didn't have time to go through and give a 0 to all those students who didn't do the work. Well, I can do that now through the setup wizard. So rather than manually enter that 0 every single assignment because it just got to be cumbersome, or maybe the last 2 weeks I started to fall behind, I can actually pop in here and change it to treat ungraded items as 0. Click continue, work my way through the wizard just like I did before, changed nothing else. But because it's the end of the term, this will very quickly enter a 0 for every student that I haven't graded yet because I ran out of time or because for any other reason that might be the case. Maybe I just missed them. And that will then update their score across the board. You'll see all of the things they haven't done that are in the gradebook are now 0s. And so unfortunately, everybody's failing because there was a lot of stuff that they needed to do that they did not do. But that is a quick and easy way for you to very quickly do that last minute update, but you only do it at the end of the term when the student has truly completed all of the work for the class. It has been lovely teaching you about the gradebook. The last and final video in the series will teach you how to lock down the content in your class, because classes will now open early so that your students can see the syllabus and potentially a welcome message or any icebreaker activities you'd like students to see before they take your course, before the course officially starts. And so to that end, you're going to want to lock down content you don't want students to see before the official first day of class. So this ends the lesson in setting up your gradebook. I hope it has been useful to you, and see you in the next video.